Well, it's Monday. Here we are. He's Vince. I'm Sean. It's Ivy Nation Sports Talk. Hope everyone's having a decent day. We're plugging along this afternoon.
You're doing the best we can.
Yeah.
We're here.
I mean, it's really all
and,
we can do, right?
Us and 15 others.
That's right. That's right. The marathon mailbag is going on at the same time on another channel right now. 5 hours strong. So thank you for everyone who is here. Maybe I shouldn't have said, I'm offering counter programming. I see DK, our old friend DK. It feels like that guy has gone by a lot of different names, not just DK, but he's here. Salty's here. I see Sean Paulus is here. Chi or Chai, not sure, is here. Hope everyone else is doing well. Maybe when that mailbag ends, we'll get to full population. Wow. DK,
he's been coming at you pretty hard here.
I mean, seriously, man, it's like I went into last night. He asked, "Does anyone know the score of last night's NBC game?" I missed it. It's supposed to be a Cowboy. How'd the Cowboys do? Just rub the salt right in the wound. It's fresh. Seriously. I get it. It's like, and I'll just say it. This is my birthday as well. So
yeah, I was waiting for you to bring it up.
At least Vince texted me today, said happy birthday. I got family. So, family's been wishing me happy birthday and all that kind of stuff. But it's been a crappy birthday weekend. And I went into last night with very low expectations. Old buddy of ours, Doug, he's a 49ers fan. You and I know Doug. He'll be our Doug. He doesn't live here in town anymore, but he's a Niners fan, and he did the, text in the afternoon. So what do you think this is going to be? And I just said, look, and he wasn't like talking crap type stuff. I said, look, I have zero expectations of this game. If they got pushed around by the Arizona Cardinals, how am I supposed to expect that they're going to play well against the San Francisco 49ers?
I mean, that's a good point.
And look what the result was.
So, I'll tell you what, I haven't watched a lot of 49er games for obvious reasons. It's usually, not being broadcast around here, and I'm not an NFL Sunday ticket guy. So Brock Purdy is playing way better than he ever did at Iowa State. I mean, we watched him play against Notre Dame, in that bowl game, and I was less than impressed with him live and in person. But like some of the throws that he made last night were like he couldn't have walked over and placed it in the hands of the receiver any better. I mean,
there were other times where he didn't have to do much. I mean, guys were wide open all freaking night long. It's like, come on, give me a break. Can someone? And that's what Jesse started. He's texting me. He's like, are the 49ers wide open against everyone, or is it just the Cowboys they're this wide open against? And it's like, I don't know. And to add insult to injury, because my fantasy team, I've got injury at quarterback, and I've used CJ Stroud the last couple of weeks, and he was decent, but he did not have a good game. But I had just picked up Purdy.
Wow.
Like in case, but I did not use him yesterday. But the other side of this is I am probably the only fantasy football owner in the country who started DJ Moore, Chicago Bears wide receiver, who had the massive game Thursday night and lost their game. I'm probably going to lose.
Ooh.
I've got Doubs for the Packers tonight. If I had started Purdy, Doubs has a decent night. I've got a chance of winning, but probably not going to happen. So nobody wants to hear about my fantasy football.
It's okay.
Team. It's like talking about your kids' youth sport, fantasy football. It's like talking about your kids, playing soccer, youth football, baseball, whatever.
So we're not going to talk about Penn soccer and football. We're not going there.
Probably not.
Okay.
Probably
all
not.
Right.
We will get to the topic at hand, and the topic at hand. Nobody wants to talk about it, but it's what we're here for. It's why it's why we make those dollars. It's like when my daughter sees me walking into the room every night just a little before 6, she says, "You going to make the money?" And I said, "Yes, I am." Yes, I am. She's not here right now, but I say, yes, I am typically when I walk into the room. So, I mean, the bottom fell out Saturday. Let's just start off. We've got some Marcus Freeman comments from his press conference today.
Okay.
To start, though, with his first comments from his press conference right after the game. Let's see what stands out here.
Obviously, just disappointed in the performance. We got to take ownership as a coaching staff first, right, and as the head coach first, and that our guys weren't prepared for whatever reason. We got to take a deep dive and figure out what it was. You know, you can point your finger at any person, any specific unit, but the reality is we better point the finger at ourselves and figure out what were the issues that led to the lack of execution. And so we obviously know we got to take care of the football. You can't turn the ball 5 times and expect to win. But you know, everybody's going to point the finger. Sam, you better point the finger at us, at me. We got to protect him. We got to do a better job protecting our quarterback and put him in situations to have a higher percentage for success. And so, you know, a lot of self-reflection. We're going to have to do a deep dive into exactly where the shortcomings happened at, and we got to get this thing figured out, and we got to turn it around because we got USC coming in next weekend. So we don't have a lot of time to feel sorry for ourselves. We better get back to work and start preparing for this next upcoming game.
So there's Marcus Freeman right after the game Saturday night, and I want to start by saying this. You know, I realize everyone's fired up, riled up, all that. I'm not gonna sit here today and say that it's time for Marcus Freeman to go. I don't think either one of us are, you know, down that path. I know there are a lot of people who do feel that way right now, or at least feel like he is not the man for the job after seeing some of the stuff that we've seen kind of heightened Saturday night. I think we all have wanted to see Marcus Freeman succeed, especially in the wake of, you know, the Brian Kelly, you know, his less than stand-up departure, and probably even more so because of the differences between Freeman and Kelly. Because when you look at the two, Marcus Freeman is just 10 times the man Brian Kelly is. You know, there's no getting around that. He is 10 times the man Brian Kelly is. He's a stand-up person, stand-up character person, charismatic person, and a good man. And I would not put any of those adjectives, phrases next to Brian Kelly's name, for starters. I don't think either one of us would, right?
I was just, you were waxing poetic, and I was kind of enjoying it. I
Okay.
mean, I agree with you wholeheartedly. Like, we all want him to be successful. And Brian said to me at one point when we were in fall practice, right? He's like, man, I think he was talking to the team. I think it was post practice, and we were like walking out. You know what I mean? He leans over to me and he's like, man, I hope he's the guy. You know, and I think that's what we all want, right? We all want Marcus Freeman to be the guy that takes Notre Dame to the next level. We all want that because of who he is off the field, right? And because of who he is in the press conference,
right?
And who we think he is to the players, and all of those different things. We all want him to be that way. And look, the bottom line is he's been on the job for a year and a half, right? Now, he was given the quote unquote keys to the Ferrari, right? There was a lot of talent here. He's doing a great job of bringing in more talent, you know, all of those things. You don't fire a coach after a year and a half, period. You don't. And so I'm now in no way going to advocate for that to be the case. But we do have to start questioning whether he is that guy. Yes. We do. We have to start questioning that. Now, look, he signed a 3-year contract. I am all about giving him all 3 years to see where this goes, right? But I think the whispers are now talks. You know what I mean? Like, it's not a whisper anymore. It's like, it was a whisper after Marshall and Stanford. Now it's like, we got to have that conversation. You know what I mean? Again, not saying that he needs to be fired. I am not saying that at all. But I'm saying that conversation needs to be had.
Yeah, he was a very good defensive coordinator, great recruiter, you know, part of his personality, all that stuff. But what we've seen these last 3 games is the verdict is still out on Marcus Freeman as a head coach, especially because it's a high-profile place like Notre Dame. As we've talked about before, when he made the blunders at the end of the Ohio State game, he's not cutting his teeth at Toledo or Central Michigan or some MAC
Right.
school. He's cutting his teeth at Notre Dame, and the stakes are a lot higher when you get to do it. Like I remember I heard one of the national guys talking after the 10 men on the field and stuff like that, who said he talked to another coach who's at a Power 5 school right now, who said, we've all done that kind of stuff, like 10 men on the field, whatever. It's just that most of us have done it at these smaller schools along the way, your Florida Atlantics or wherever it happens to be. But there's that saying though, Vince, that, you can't let one loss affect, one game affect two. You can't let a loss in this game affect the next game or the next game after that. But the fact is, when we look at what's happened these last 3 games, the Ohio State loss has affected the 2 games that have followed it as well. The way things ended against Ohio State, to go from 10 men on the field, how that last 4+ minutes against Ohio State was handled, to an inconsistent, penalty-riddled performance that was bailed out by a 4th and 16 miracle against Duke. And then that rolls into Saturday night, where you see a completely unprepared looking, listless, lifeless team just get pushed around the way they did. They're a 4th and 16 away from a 3-game losing streak right now. If Hartman doesn't make that improbable run on 4th and 16, they've lost 3 games in a row at this point. And as much as I want Marcus Freeman to succeed, there are just more questions now. 21 games into his career, he's 14-7. There are more questions now than there were last year. We've already seen Freeman face and come through, some, a handful of basically crossroad type moments, like Marshall. How is he going to respond and rebound from that? Will they get it rolling? They beat BYU. They beat North Carolina. We're talking about, maybe they've turned a corner. And then Stanford comes, and then they got it together again after Stanford, beat a couple ranked teams, including 4th-ranked Clemson, and we don't have to rehash all that. We know all about it, but it's just Louisville was a well-coached team. Saturday night. Duke was a well-coached team 2 weeks ago, and Notre Dame has been the opposite these last couple of weeks. And, Freeman has fallen on all these swords, and he's taken the bullets for everybody. He's not throwing anybody under the bus. Again, another reason to respect him. Talk about being a stand-up guy. He's not, BK up there throwing everyone and, anyone under the bus when this stuff goes wrong. But what we've seen though for these last 2+ games, there are just more questions than answers right now about Marcus Freeman. I think that's pretty obvious to all of us right now.
I wanted to bring this up because you mentioned it, right? You talked about how they sound different in a press conference. Jeff Brown says, well, today I totally agree with your comments on Marcus Freeman versus BK. He sure can sound somewhat like him in a press conference. I don't know where you're getting that, because he doesn't sound anything like Brian Kelly in a press conference. Go ahead and listen to LSU's post-game press conference after they lost, right? And then go listen to Marcus Freeman's. Marcus Freeman pointed at himself the entire time. Now, can he fix those mistakes and all of that? We don't know, right? But he's at least blaming himself, which is what you should do as the head coach.
I mean, yeah, and I completely agree with that, because again, that's the biggest, not the biggest, but if we're talking press conferences, one of the biggest differences between the two. But I mean, Freeman has in a fairly short amount of time, if Jeff's point is that he's learned how to talk around a question.
Sure. I get that. That's all head coaches.
And we'll hear some of that today, we've got some other comments, and, again, the reason he talks around some of this is if it were Brian Kelly, he would try to play this, I'm so wise and sarcastic, and I'm going to act like I'm talking around it, but then I'm going to give a little jab here at the end and let you know that I'm really blaming all, whoever it happens to be, whether it's the center or my court. Kelly wants to act like he's fallen on the sword. Freeman actually will fall on the sword, and not, again, he's not going to lay either hang his players out to dry or his assistant coaches out to dry. that's really the most that you can ask for. So if you're saying that, he doesn't necessarily directly answer every question, okay, maybe that's the similarity. But I agree with what you're saying, Vince. Like, otherwise, there are no similarities between
None.
Freeman and
Zero.
and BK and press
and
conference.
crying. If you like Brian Kelly's jokes, man, then I don't really understand your sense of humor. How about that? So
welcome to everyone who has been over on the Mailbag Marathon on this Monday afternoon. Glad to have you with us today. Vince and I just hanging out here, getting into some Marcus Freeman Notre Dame conversation. We just had the first comment from Marcus Freeman, and I was looking at something else. Rob says, what needs to happen? A total come to Jesus meeting, let it all out. Afterwards, get back to the basics. Let everyone know that everyone is held accountable. Dominate the basics, then go forward.
I mean, there needs to be accountability, no doubt about it. I mean, and obviously it starts with Marcus Freeman, and he's going to hold himself accountable. But he needs to hold his assistant coaches accountable, because this is the first group of assistant coaches that he hired. Right. And we talked about that at the beginning of the season. All right, this is his coaching staff, like, his group. And so you're going to live and you're going to die with your group. He needs to hold them accountable now.
Yeah.
And whether that's firing or whether that's whatever, it's obviously not going to happen in the first week of October. Right. But at the end of the season, we need to see some changes somehow, some way. There needs to be some changes. So, I think the jury's still out on all of that. That was the one of the major knocks on Brian Kelly, is he was never willing to make those changes until it was forced upon him by Jack Swarbrick.
Well, and that's going to be a big question for Marcus Freeman, because there is still a rest of the season to get through. And I mean, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but there's a chance that they can still run the table from here on out. Like, if we somehow see some semblance of the team and the offense that we saw in the first 4 or 5 games of the season, there's a chance they can do it. This is still a good defense. And, I realize the defense got its share of fingers pointed at it Saturday as well. But my response to that, and we weren't planning on talking a whole lot about the defense today, my response to that is a defense can only do so much when the offense is not helping it out. Like when we talk about complementary football, there was no complementary football between offense and defense Saturday night. And when the defense is on the field that often, yeah, you still got to make a tackle. But at the same time, fatigue sets in. What did Vince Lombardi say? Fatigue makes cowards of us all. Well, fatigue also makes tired football players when they need to make plays. And unfortunately, they whiffed on a couple of those big runs by Jordan that turned into touchdowns. And, really, Jeff Brom, he could have, if he wanted to really kind of go for the jugular, he could have gone for the end zone a couple of times, but he was more than willing just to take his layups, kick the field goals there at the end, or it could have been maybe even a little bit more lopsided, before it was all said and done.
Sure. No, you're absolutely right. It was a failure on so many different levels, and it's less of a failure on the defense than it is on the offense, in my opinion. I didn't. Yes, the defense missed tackles, and we talked about that ad nauseum during the post-game show. No doubt about it. I'm not giving them a free pass, right? Because you still got to make those plays. But the offense did them zero favors in this game. They were on the field way too much, and frankly, they did a pretty darn good job based on the average starting field position that Louisville had versus what Notre Dame had, and held them to field goals. I mean, yes, they scored on 6 consecutive possessions in the second half, but I'm pretty sure most of them were field goals. I mean, what more can you ask for? What more? I mean, they stopped Louisville. They didn't let them in the end zone. I have no issue really with the overall defense. It's the offense that I have an issue with, because you're not going to win games scoring what they did. You're just not.
And I heard part of the post-game show with you guys the other night. I won't say I heard the whole thing, but I know you guys talked about it. And there's a lot of, fingers pointing at Jared Parker right now, and deservedly so. And I've got a couple of the sound bites that we're going to talk about. I'll just play the sound bites first, and then we'll just kind of get into the whole thing. There were multiple questions that came up about offense, play calling, predictability, those kind of things today. And I'll play this first one because he was asked about the play calling. And here's the response. This is the shorter of the two. So I'll play this one first. Here's the response to the play calling.
Yeah, it's everything we do as an offensive staff is a collaborative effort, and we talk about it. And so, I have no issues with the play calling, right? I have issues with the execution, and that's what we have to attack. We can blame it on a call, we can blame it on anything we want, but the reality is, if we feel strongly enough to call that play, then we have to have answers for why it did or doesn't work. And so that's where I'm attacking, is why didn't it work? If this guy was supposed to do that and he was supposed to do that, then that's the issue. We have to make sure our guys are crystal clear on what they need to do and don't make mistakes.
So, he says he has no issue with the play calling. I think that's, what stood out from that soundbite, what most people have kind of jumped on. No issue with the play calling. Now, this other one is a little bit more in depth, and this was an interesting one that was asked about Audric Estime's ineffectiveness the last two games, and was asked if predictability has anything to do with that. Predictability in terms of how they line up and that kind of stuff. So here's the response to that. Are they too predictable?
If we're going to call it, we keep saying the word predictability. If we're going to call a play, right, there's a reason we call it, and we feel like it can have success. We have to execute it. We have to execute it. A lot of offenses are predictable, but you can't stop them, right? We can say we know what USC is going to do, but you have to stop them, right? And so the same thing with us is that, we have to find ways to continue to get the ball in Audric's hands, right? And what we can't do is put our team and our offense in a position where we feel like we have to throw the ball all the time because we're down 10, down 14, down 21. We can't do that. But we have to block better, and it's not just the O-line, right? Our perimeter, our wideouts, our tight ends, everybody has a piece in blocking, and we have to make sure we're blocking. And a lot of times, if you don't have success running the ball, everybody says it's the offensive line's fault, or it's predictable, or whatever term we want to use. But it's there's a lot of people involved with making sure they get their job done, so we can have success running the ball. So it all boils down to coaching. I'm not going to point my finger at the players. It's coaching and making sure that our guys know exactly what to do, and then they go do it so we can execute on a play that maybe you can predict what we're doing.
Okay, so here's my biggest issue with that. And I don't know, like you're kind of making the face now too. The biggest problem that I have with that response, okay, again, taking the blame, putting it on himself and his coach is fine. But to say that it is execution / coaching versus predictability, I have a big problem with that, Vince, because when you watch that game, all you have to do is look at the personnel that's on the field and the way they are lining up. And it was literally, man, like 99% of the time you can go, this is going to be a run. This is going to be a pass. It was not much more complex than that. And especially when you're looking at loaded boxes, 8-man boxes, 9-man boxes, and the way they're lining up against it. Like if someone like us can sit there and be able to recognize it that quickly, watching it on TV, guys who get paid a hell of a lot more than us are going to be able to recognize it. And they obviously had the right calls made, and their guys were making plays all night long. So to say that it's, like we just have to execute it better and we'll be able to make these plays, I don't know. I think there's a disconnect someplace. You're muted.
It's a reach with the answer because he doesn't want to point fingers at somebody in particular. Like that, it's a word salad, right? That's your favorite phrase. It's a word salad because he doesn't want to blame players, and he doesn't want to blame his specific coaches either, right? And so if I go back to the play calling answer, and you go back to the predictability answer, all of those different things, I mean, I understand what he's saying. I get what he's saying. Look, okay, Penn High School, right? It's a big high school in this area.
Mhm.
They've been really good at football for a really long time. When they were winning all their state championships back in the 90s, every defense had Penn's offensive playbook, right? And they just ran it down your throat, and they could have we're gonna run it right up the middle right now. It didn't matter because they were better than you,
Right.
and they road graded your ass every single play, right?
Right.
So he's saying it doesn't matter if you're predictable, if you're better, then you're better. Here's the problem. His guys weren't better that day.
Right.
And so you've got to change it up. Now,
They haven't been clearly better
correct
than the last 3 teams.
Yes, exactly
The-
right.
The teams prior to that, they were clearly better than.
Correct.
And you can do that against Central Michigan and Tennessee State. And,
Right.
they struggled for a little bit against NC, but you can do
Right.
that against those kind of
No,
teams.
I
It's
agree
like,
completely.
If we sit and look at, like we've got sort of like group of 5 splits versus power 5 splits, and they're going to look a lot different in terms of how this team has performed against the two.
Right.
And I mean,
So,
one is obviously FCS for that matter.
for sure. And I get what he's saying. Like it makes sense, but it doesn't make sense. Like, but here's the thing. We're never going to get the answers we want.
Right.
Ever. So if you want him to go up there and say, yeah, Jared Parker called a terrible game and this particular play and this particular situation was horrible, it's never going to happen. He's never going to say the 5 offensive linemen or the 8 offensive linemen that we played in the game played terrible. Sam Hartman had his worst game. He's not going to say any of that. While it might be true, we all know it's true. He's never going to say that because that's not the kind of guy that he is. That guy left. He's in Baton Rouge now.
Yeah.
Marcus Freeman's not going to say that. So we can pick apart his answers, and I'm with you 100%. Like, I would like to hear some different stuff, to be honest with you, but he's never going to do that. He's just not. Now, behind closed doors, I hope he's doing all of that. I really do, because that's the accountability piece that we were talking about,
Yes.
right? And so we'll see if he's doing that as things move forward, but he is never going to say that in a press conference, ever.
Wicked Broncos, thanks for the super chat. He says, if Parker can't score more than 21 points on the worst defense in college football in USC, he should be fired on the spot. I don't understand as a Notre Dame fan why we can never get the OCs like Ryan Grubbs at Washington or Sean Lewis at CU. I mean, obviously there was a big offseason offensive coordinator hiring debacle. We can all acknowledge that.
Yep.
It's in the past. It ain't changing. And they're not firing the offensive coordinator mid-season. That's not happening.
Right.
But part of this as well is we've touched on this at times before, and what we've seen these last 3 games, the way this offense has changed, it really feels like you've got a defensive-minded head coach who's putting his thumb on the scales in terms of how he wants an
Yes.
offense to be called
I agree.
so that he can protect the defense.
Yep.
That's really it.
That's
It really
a
feels
problem.
like that to
That's
me.
a problem.
There's
I
a
agree with you.
stereotype of of defensive
Yeah.
head coaches, and and Marcus Freeman, because he's young and hip and all these charismatic, all these different things. It's like you feel like maybe it's going to be different with a guy like him, but at his core, he's still a defensive coach, and that's what it feels like. Like he's calling there's not much difference in what we've seen in the way this stuff has been called between Marcus Freeman and Marty Schottenheimer right now. Like Marty Schottenheimer, old school Cleveland Browns, Kansas City Chiefs, run the ball and play defense. That was Marty's motto. And there's
That was Marcus Freeman's motto when he got the job.
And that's exactly right. Run the ball and play defense. That's what those guys have in their brain. So I don't think you can pin all of this on Jared Parker even, but obviously we can't separate it because we're not in those rooms to see how these game plans are being put together.
Well, and here's the other thing. And here's why I don't put it all on Jared Parker, and I realize everybody else does, and that's fine. Look, he sucked the past
And I'm not
3 weeks.
absolving Jared Parker.
No,
of
he's been
everything,
terrible
but I'm
the
just
past 3
saying
weeks. But it's as Marcus Freeman said, it is a collaborative effort. Okay. So it can't all be on one coach. It's a collaborative effort, right? So the same guy that was the offensive coordinator the first 4 games is the same guy that's the offensive coordinator the last 3. Yes, I understand the competition that they were going up against in the first 4 games. I get it, and I'm not saying that I don't. But the play calling and the scheme was much more imaginative than it is now. And that has nothing to do with who they're playing. Yeah. Nothing. The run game was more creative. The play calling was more creative and made more sense. That was the first 4. This is the last 3. Something had to have changed. I don't know what it was. Something changed with Jared Parker.
Wicked Bronco says he's not calling the offensive plays. That's on Parker. That's the point of hiring an OC so they can do that. That's obvious.
But there's also a scheme.
There's the game plan during the week that is being put together. And the head coach is going to have, again, going back to one of the sound bites that we played, it's a collaborative effort. And he is the head coach. And just look at the hype video that we're not allowed to play on this show that came out after the Duke game. What did Marcus Freeman want to do on the Estime run? Jared Parker asked him. Again, Parker has to call the play, but he also has to, run certain things through the head coach to say, what do you want to do here? So it's, let's not be so naive as to think that just because the head coach is not the play caller doesn't mean he doesn't have any input on the thing. And in the Duke game, when Estime ended up scoring the touchdown, Parker in the headsets asked Marcus Freeman, what do you want to do here? Freeman said he wanted to run. What did Freeman tell us afterwards that he wanted to do? Freeman was just trying to run that play to get maybe 5 or 6 yards, whatever, use a little bit of clock, and then hopefully try to kick a field goal for the win. That's a defensive mindset.
Oh, 100%.
That's not an aggressive offensive mindset. That's a defensive mindset is what that is.
Yep.
So I'm not saying that Freeman is calling the plays, but he's the head coach and he has full input on anything that he wants to do over the course of a game, whether it's run, pass, or whatever it happens to be. And again, going back to the game plan during the week, like this is the general game plan I want. These are the kind of plays that I want. These are the kind of personnel packages that I want. The head coach has full input over all that stuff during the week when you're getting ready for an opponent.
Yep. Completely agree with you. But the buck stops with the head coach. So if you're pissed off at Jared Parker, you need to be pissed off at Marcus Freeman. Bottom line. I mean, that's where it is. He made the hire. It's his guy, and he approves or doesn't approve what the offense is doing. And so that's where we're at right now. And somebody says they could see a scenario where Marcus Freeman gets fired at the end of the year. I don't, unless they lose every single game from here on out. Or he gets caught doing something off the field that he shouldn't be doing. He's not getting fired after year 2. It's just not going to happen.
They don't have a TV deal done yet. He's got a lot of time left on that contract. They're not just going to eat that contract. Now, there is a little bit of an X factor when the fact that you've got a new athletic director coming in next year. No matter where you are,
sure,
that's always a thing. And I think that you probably get held under a different microscope when you are somebody else's hire, when you have, a new boss come in. But that's not going to be until next year. I can't see that happening, after this year. I realize maybe you want that to happen, but I don't see that
it's not going to
happening.
It's not going to. Because, yes, we can all agree they should not have lost to Louisville. We can all agree there's been some questionable calls made during a game. We can all agree on that. All of us. Okay. But everything else that he's doing is top notch. Recruiting, relationships with the players, all of those other things. Those are all top notch situations. And so you have to take in the entire thing when you're talking about evaluating a coach. And they're not going to fire him after year 2. It's not going to happen unless things take a severe downturn. Severe.
Wolfgang Mozart, glad to have you with us, Wolfie. He says, will Freeman be able to get the people he wants in the offseason with the new AD coming in?
That's a loaded question, though, isn't it, Sean? Because number
I
one,
mean, he wanted Parker to
yeah,
begin with.
well, good. I mean, uh, is he going to make changes? That's number
Right.
one. Because if he doesn't make any changes, there's not going to be anybody to get. Okay. So that's the biggest question in my mind. Is he going to make changes at the end of the year, whatever those changes are? Or is this going to be the exact same staff going into year 3? That's a big question mark for me. It's a big question mark for me. Can he hold these guys accountable? I don't know.
What do you think about this? Christopher asks, should Parker insert some of Sam Hartman's offense from Wake Forest? Would that work?
Absolutely 100% no. I hate that offense more than life itself. And you can't just install a completely new offense in the middle of the season. That's not realistic.
The biggest things for me, like when I go back to the predictability and stuff like that, like, okay, you need to formationally show the same look, but run different things out of it, essentially, right? I mean, I
Right.
know that
Sure.
sounds simple, but like if you're going to be under center, you can't just hand off all the time, which is what happens virtually all the time when they're under center. Like that's the best time to show play action. You hide the ball a little bit better, and you've shown the tendency that you're going to run the ball more times than not. So now if you line up under center and you fake to Audric Estime between the guards and then you drop back, it seems like you should probably have somebody, you should have a safety out of position someplace, but that's the thing to me is like between the fact that they don't nearly use play action enough. They showed an RPO look a time or two over the course of the game as well. But, we've talked about that. And I know you guys have talked about that. They don't do nearly enough of that because again, it keeps the defense more honest, just doing those little things, not to mention the fact that if you're going to more RPO, you can take advantage of a defense with a guy like Sam Hartman. But that doesn't seem to be what they want to do right now.
Well, and here's the thing, which is why I think Freeman is more involved in this offensive side of the ball than people want to give credit for. I know for a fact that Jared Parker's an RPO guy. I know this for a absolute 100% fact, and they're not running them. So why is that? I don't know the answer to that, but I feel like I know the answer to that. You know what I mean? So, why aren't they running them? Because I think they could be very successful with that. I really do. I really, really do.
Christopher wants to know the difference between RPO and what Sam did at Wake Forest.
It's the manner in which they do it. I mean, yes, the overall concept is an RPO, but that slow mesh, just standing there with literally the running back and the quarterback are just standing there for like a 3 count and right behind the offensive line. That's just, it's no, absolutely not. So it's completely different. Yeah. The overall arching concept is the same, but the manner in which you do it is completely different.
Couple other super chats here. Jay says today's press conference really bothered me regarding comments made from Marcus Freeman on execution versus calls made, in-game coaching decisions, and anything off script for Jared Parker have been disastrous.
In the last 3 games is what should be the end of that.
Right.
Because, they scored on 6 straight drives in game 1. Like there was a lot of really positive offensive things to talk about in the first 4 games. Not the least of which was the creativity of the run game and the play calling. So again, what's the difference between 4 and 3? Yes, the competition is different, but the calls were different. They were different, people. Go back and watch those games. I realize everybody's mind is clouded from the last 3, and I understand that, and I get that, and I respect that, but it looks like a completely different offense the first 4 games of the season. A completely different offense. And it has nothing to do with the guys that were on the other side of the ball.
I just lost the other super chat that was in there. Wicked Broncos had one. I'm going to scroll up and see if I can find it. And unless he took it out of there, I don't know.
Oh, yeah, it's right here.
You got
this
it?
One.
Okay. So he said, we never got an answer on why Greathouse didn't play when he's our best wide receiver. Either you're hurt or you're not. Also don't see Faison involved after the big TD play. No estimate on short yard. So Marcus Freeman did say today that Greathouse didn't practice a whole lot last week, and basically that he was still affected by that hamstring, and that's understandable. I've had, I don't know, like guys in, I don't know how many guys have had hamstrings. I've popped a hamstring multiple times, and there's different severities of the hamstring, but the bottom line is, if you're a guy who's gonna, bear down and you're gonna get after it with your legs, it's like when you're coming back from it, you can feel like you're okay and just walking around, maybe you're okay. But the first time you put any real strain on it, that thing is just going to go again. Hamstrings, they take a while to come back from, so to expect that Jaden Greathouse was going to be able to get in there and like give them 30 reps and go full speed was probably not very realistic. And so I'll be surprised if he's even up to full speed by this weekend, especially since it's cooling off as this week goes on. It's going to keep getting cooler.
Yep, absolutely. And so I was not overly surprised. I mean, I think he was in for a handful of plays, here and there. So I was not that surprised. Yes, he was a technical go, which is why they said he was a go. But I'm sure that thing was still bothering him. As far as the Faison thing is concerned, the only reason he was in the game in the first place is because Rico Flores was getting checked out by the medical staff. As soon as Rico was good to go, he was back in the game. I mean, it's a depth chart. That's what it is. So, you can blame the coaching staff, I suppose, but I mean,
Time to Grind says he pulls his hamstring every year in fall softball, and it usually lasts all season. And see, like this, back in my younger, like high school / after high school into Army, playing intramural stuff, like those days, like when I still had, what resembled some wheels, like I relied on, like speed, going all out as my thing. And when I knew I was getting old is when the hamstrings started popping, because that stuff started happening every year. And when that stuff started happening, it's like, I'm done with this. I can't run the way I want to run. I'm done.
Right. Yeah,
I'm not going to be a beer league softball player who goes one base to the next, I was a take as many bases as I could kind of guy. So
that's how I got things done, man. My coach used to tell me, you're on first, you're on third.
That's right.
I would steal second, steal third. Those days are far behind me, let me tell you.
Yep. Cryan wants to know, at what point do we stop drinking the Marcus Freeman Kool-Aid? All the press runs in New York, the I Love Sam Hartman, I Love Audric Estime Cringe Fest, and the Wake Up the Echoes podcast.
What do you want? He's the head coach at Notre Dame. Do you want us all to take craps on him at this point because he's a year and a half into his tenure and he's not doing what you think he should be doing? It's not a love fest. It is a reasonable analysis of how he's doing. No one is love festing Marcus Freeman right now. I don't know what podcast or show you're listening to, but no one is love festing Marcus Freeman. I believe about 5 minutes ago, we all said it was his fault because the buck stops with him.
I mean, this was, like the New York, New York's press runs. And I mean,
but that's what you do. You put your guy out front. He's your guy.
Would you rather have the national media saying good things about Marcus Freeman or essentially saying the most neutral things they could about Brian Kelly and talking garbage about him, when he's off the air, because they realize what he really is. It's like Marcus Freeman is good for the image of the Notre Dame football program. And I mean, you like the former players, there is so much. We had Reggie Brooks on a few weeks ago and talking to other players. Like there's so much more connection with the former players now than there has been in probably at least a couple of decades. And that is a good thing as well. Now, obviously we all know that at the end of the day, Marcus Freeman's going to be judged on his wins and his losses.
100%.
But again, it is nothing but a good thing to have positive images of Notre Dame in the national media. If you want to call that drink of the Kool-Aid, so be it.
And what do you guys like? What do you guys want Marcus Freeman to do? Do you want him to come out and just point the finger at everybody else for the way the game went? Is that what you really want? Because that's what you had with the last coach, and y'all hated it. So you can't have it both ways. He's taking accountability for what he did, and I give him credit for that. Now he's got to fix it, okay? But again, I'll say it again. We're not going to fire we're not going to fire Marcus Freeman because he's doing a lot of other things really, really well. Really, really well. Now, eventually, they may not renew his contract because he's not actually winning the big games.
Right.
I get that. But you're not going to fire him after a year and a half because he didn't win the one game y'all wanted him to win. Come on.
Again, we knew that there were going to be growing pains that came with an inexperienced head coach. The offset of that is, look how much better the quarterback recruiting is right now, as well as look how much better the overall recruiting is when it comes to skill talent. Look at the way the running back room looks, the wide receiver room looks,
Correct.
the secondary looks. Didn't look like that 2 years ago under Brian Kelly. Look how different that looks right now when those rooms are stocked with talent. Now, are there still issues with the receivers? Sure, because they're young and they're getting some things figured out. But I think the balance, obviously, is you accept the growing pains in the short term because the talent pool is going to continually get better over the next couple of years. And I'm not saying it's going to take until year 4, but I'm just using this as an example. But by year 3, next year, /year 4, the year after that, the overall talent on this roster is going to look unrecognizable compared to where it was just 2 years ago under Brian Kelly. And that's where you hope that, if you have a guy like Marcus Freeman who has that recruiting ability and the staff that he has that recruiting ability, that talent, that much better base of talent, starting with those quarterbacks, is going to help offset that some of that stuff, and that as he sort of gets hopefully those mistakes out of his system in the next couple of years, that the talent pool is going to be much greater, and then things are really going to start clicking and firing here.
Yeah, soon. I mean, there's things that he needs to learn. There's accountability that needs to take place, right? And I'm not willing to throw Jared Parker completely under the bus. Again, a lot of that comes from the head coach, right? Me personally, I think he needs to let Jared Parker run the offense the way he wants to run it. And it's as simple as that.
I would right now as well. Like, based on what I've seen the last 3 weeks,
just let him do it.
I would just say, do your thing.
Yeah.
I hired you. I wanted you. Do your thing.
Yep. I'm hands off now. Just go. Because I think his thumbprint is on this offense. And I think that's a problem. You know what I mean? And so I think if he just lets the guy coach, let him do his thing, because he lets Al Golden do his thing. I think that's pretty obvious, right? And I think that's paid off for him in year 2. He needs to let Jared Parker do his thing.
NH says, I'm still way too emotional about the last 3 weeks to feel comfortable having an absolute opinion on Coach Freeman. And I agree with that.
And that's fine, yeah.
I do think you have to, 1, let some of the emotion get out a little bit, but 2, by this weekend, there can be a completely different set of emotions, one way or the other, by the way. I mean, USC is going to have the best offense on the field Saturday night, but their offense is still mostly one guy.
Yes.
Like, if you see how they're doing things right now, it's Caleb Williams and a prayer for the most part. And Notre Dame is clearly going to have the best defense on the field. So how many points can Jared Parker et al. Score against USC's defense Saturday night? I would let it fly, man. I would just say, okay, you got Caleb Williams. We've got Sam Hartman. We know what Sam Hartman can be when the handcuffs are off him. Let's let it fly. Let's have some fun.
Correct.
Let's see what we can do.
Yep. Completely agree.
That's how I'd roll. Super chat from Michael XXX. Oh, in pounds? Is this
that's euros.
Across the pond? Okay.
I think that's euros. Yeah.
He says, let's look forward to USC. Speaking of which, need to find a way to run the ball and control the clock. Otherwise, it'll be a long night. See, this is the Marcus Freeman offensive game plan that you just laid out right there. Run the ball and control the clock. Okay, Marty Schottenheimer. We're digging Marty up and we're bringing him back in here Saturday night. I don't want Marty Ball. We don't have Christian Okoye and Barry Word. I'm sorry.
I don't
Ernest
even know what
Biner.
to say to that. I don't even know what to say to that. I really don't. I mean, Michael, you're not wrong. Like, that's not a bad game plan, but you better be able to score points, man. Like, you better score every single drive if that is going to be your plan. Like, every single drive better end with touchdowns.
And Travis says we can't run the ball. That's a problem too, is they want that to be their identity, and obviously they couldn't do that the other night. But again, like when you go back to the predictability, and it's, you know, like, does he really believe that they're not predictable? Because you've got to be able to look at yourself and self-scout and figure out what your tendencies are. It shouldn't be that hard, right? It shouldn't be that hard to figure out what your tendencies are, because it seems like they're pretty obvious.
I agree. Everybody knew what they were going to do on 3rd and 1. I can tell you that.
Yep. Jeff wants to know if we're to the point where they bench Hartman and get the young quarterback some real experience, or at what point does that happen?
No, they are not at that point. Sam Hartman is a starting quarterback, period, end of discussion. And that is not going to change until maybe the bowl game.
Yeah, good point. But yeah, and I mean, at that point, maybe Sam is doing draft prep. Who knows what's going on?
Depending on what bowl it is, you know, maybe it doesn't even matter. Maybe they're like, hey, Sam, head out to San Diego and start preparing for the draft or whatever. You know, we want to work with the younger kids. That is, I can't even tell you how frustrating it is to hear people say, oh, get the seniors out. Let's just start all the young kids. Season's over.
Play for the future. Yeah,
that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
That's, you know how many transfers you would have after the season?
That's terrible.
You know, like, what kind of message are you sending to anybody? You know, what kind of message are you sending to anyone who's thinking about transferring in the future, starting with the quarterbacks? If all of a sudden you're going to get this quarterback and you're just going to sit him now to play young, inexperienced quarterbacks, what kind of message are you sending to the entirety of your, you know, sure, it's great for the guys who haven't been starting, maybe, if all of a sudden they're out there starting and they're playing more minutes and more snaps and all that kind of stuff. But what kind of message are you sending in terms of, are we here to win or not? Because you're still there to win football games. It's not just a series of exhibitions for the rest of the year, just because you're not going to be in the college football playoff. And for that matter, you still have an outside chance to at least make a New Year's Six Bowl at this point.
Which, by the way, they haven't won since, John, 1993?
1993. Yep.
So that's still something they haven't done. Just saying, it's a very low bar, but that's still something that they haven't done. So, you know, got to keep that in mind.
DK says, can we get a whiteboard on how to run an offense versus a loaded box?
I mean, I don't think you really need a whiteboard for that, but, you know, just saying.
I agree.
Yeah.
Well, Vince, are you ready for rapid fire?
Oh, I've never been so ready for anything in my life.
So last week,
you've got a loaded rapid fire here too.
I tell you what, we've got some more Marcus Freeman comments coming up in rapid fire.
People are gonna love you.
So I know. We're just gonna make everybody happy all over again because they want to hear from Marcus Freeman right now. So last week we saw the miraculous 4th and 16 play. This week it was the disastrous 4th and 11 decision in the fourth quarter by the head coach. Just under 10 minutes to go. You're down by 11 points, trailing 24-13. You've got the ball, your own 35. A timeout is called by the defense, and the head coach still keeps the offense on the field. They decided to go for it on 4th and 11.
Right, and so you play a percentage, hey, we either got to get a 3 and out if we punt the ball, and hopefully we get enough time to go have 2 separate possessions, or you try to convert right there and play the percentages of, okay, so even if you don't convert here and you go 3 and out, you force a kick the field goal, it's still a 2-point game. And so that went into my decision.
All right, so there's Marcus Freeman on the decision. Vince, what do you think about this decision to go for it?
I understand his reasoning, but it was still a terrible decision. I mean, The defense was playing fairly well at that point. I mean, again, the defense played fairly well the entire game. You know, Jack Plummer never proved he could go the entire length of the field, really. I mean, consistently. I still don't think, like, I saw somebody in the Irish Breakdown, Facebook page, whatever, be like, why'd they go get Sam Hartman? They should have gotten Jack Plummer. Like, oh, God. It's like, I just feel like people just took stupid pills for breakfast this morning.
Yeah.
But anyway, you still punt the ball, and I get where he's coming from, but with 9.5 minutes left, you still got plenty of time for 2 possessions, man. Like, plenty of time. Like, how much faith do you have in your defense? Not much is what that tells me. And the way the offense was playing, that was not a smart call.
Well, that's the thing. It's one thing to make that call, but if you're going to make that call, you need to have something, again, this goes back to your offensive philosophy. You need to have something very specific dialed up right away that you think is going to get you that 11 yards, no matter what it is, whether it's like a quick pump fake one way and now you're looking the other and you expect it, someone to be one-on-one or like a Chris Tyree in space, or even like Jordan Faison in space for that matter, the way he played on those 2 catches. So it's just, you turned an 11-point game into a 2-touchdown game. And then ultimately you scored one more touchdown after that. It was basically garbage time at that point. And it was just not a good decision. And what you hope is this does not become the defining decision of Marcus Freeman's career.
Nope. Completely agree with you. I mean, it was just a bad move. It was a bad move. Everybody in the stadium knew it was a bad move, and it did. NH says it came across as desperate. You're absolutely right. It did come across as desperate because he was desperate.
He was.
He was very desperate in that moment. Very.
Let me ask you about a less talked about. It wasn't really even discussed in the broadcast. 2nd and goal from the 5. Or 2nd and goal from the 4, and there was an ineligible receiver downfield for Louisville. Notre Dame takes the penalty to make it 2nd and 9. So you push it back 5 yards, and then, of course, they get their first. This is the first touchdown drive for Louisville. They score the touchdown on the next play. I thought it was odd because, 1, you give them an extra down, even if you're pushing them back 5 yards. But 2, what do you always hear about the red zone? And you're an offensive, former offensive coordinator. Yeah, the space gets compacted. You gave Louisville more space to run with out there, and it ended up being pretty valuable. I thought that was not a very good decision myself to take that penalty. What did you think?
I never thought about it until you brought it up in the rapid fire, and then I went back, and I was like, oh, yeah, no, you don't take that penalty because you're giving them an extra shot at the end zone, and I don't want to give anybody an extra shot at the end zone. Plus, you're giving them more space and all of that. So I agree with your thinking on that. I never thought about it until you mentioned it. Like, of all the things that happened in that game that were bad.
Well, that's the thing. There were too many other things that ended up happening that got buried, but I had it in my notes at the time, and someone actually texted me about it, and I was like, well, this is worth bringing up. It's just
I agree with you.
About
yet another bad decision.
I know. And there was another one, I thought, toward the end of the first half. Sam Hartman gets sacked, so it's 3rd and 13, 58 seconds left. They call timeout, and Hartman ends up firing an incompletion on the next play. Notre Dame ends up punting, and it gives Louisville the chance. They drove down. They ended up missing a field goal at the end of the first half, but by calling that timeout, you're leaving Louisville with time. I feel like Marcus Freeman has been really judicious and pretty good with some of his decisions on how he's used timeouts. I felt like that was not one of the better decisions in that case.
Because I don't want him spending timeouts to help the other team. Like, I get calling timeouts because you want to give your offense an opportunity, 2-minute drill, all that stuff. I get that. But yeah, I did not like at the moment. I didn't like that call, to be honest with you. And I was shocked that they missed the field goal in that moment as well.
Yep, I agree. All right. So former football walk-on and lacrosse scholarship player Jordan Faison is now on a football scholarship. Here's Marcus Freeman on the receiver who caught his first touchdown pass in his first career game Saturday night. He took the walk-on off, and Faison, are you kidding me? Do I not have this? I'll tell you what. Let's talk about something else. It doesn't look like I've got that ready to go, but I can get it ready to go here.
All right.
Real quick.
Give us another one.
Yeah, let me give you something else.
Because I'm very curious as to what he says here about this. Because that was like a, how do I want to say this? That was about a $500,000 decision there.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. So how about the schedule? A lot of people mad about the schedule and its impact. Here's what Freeman said about that.
I don't use that as a reason for a lack of performance. Now, every week you evaluate how you prepare, and that's something that we'll continuously do. What do we feel is best to get our guys prepared for this game? And so as the head coach, I take ownership of saying they weren't prepared the way we needed to be prepared to play Louisville. And so as I go back to this week and the preparation, say, okay, what do I believe? What do we believe it's going to take to make sure Saturday night at Notre Dame Stadium we're ready to go? And so what I don't want to do, Ron, is use being tired as an excuse, right? And I don't want our players to use that as an excuse. We're not tired. You played Saturday night. You got all day to rest, and you know what? That's what a part of playing at Notre Dame is about. Man, we're fortunate. We get 4 primetime games, and that's how we got to look. We get another primetime game versus USC, Notre Dame Stadium. And if you don't have the bubbles in your stomach, then you're not the elite competitor we need you to be, right? I think when you say that, man, maybe we're tired, it's our 4th primetime game versus a ranked opponent and all these other things, that just leaves room for excuses, and that's something that I won't let our guys do.
So what do you think about all this, Vince? I mean, we know it's not the easiest schedule, but what do you think about the impact potentially on the Irish?
Look, I think there's an impact. I think it's being overblown, though, to be honest with you. I don't know. I don't subscribe to that as an excuse. I agree with Marcus Freeman. It's not an excuse for losing those games. I would put more of a fault on Marcus Freeman for not having his team ready emotionally, because they weren't.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think that it's much less about the schedule. Look, everyone has tough stretches in their schedule.
Sure.
At some point. And they're night games. These are still young guys, right? Like they're 18 to 23, 24-year-olds. They're young guys. They're full of energy. I know that they've got tough schedules. Now, apparently last week was midterms week. I was thinking it was this week, but it was last week was midterms.
Yeah, he said some people had midterms last week. Some of them have them this week. Like, okay.
And, and that's, I know that always has some impact as well. That's, like you wonder maybe how much of that they did not have near the fire that Louisville had Saturday night
100%.
for whatever reason.
Yep.
Whether it was the schedule, the way the last 2 games, maybe what that took out of them, some guys with midterms, whatever it happens to be, they did not have that fire.
Correct. And I get that it's difficult to get up for every single game when playing Notre Dame is every other team's Super Bowl. Like, I get all of those analogies and everything, but the bottom line is they weren't up for this game, and they haven't been up for the past 2 games, and that's inexcusable. It's inexcusable. Sorry.
So for some reason, my Faison audio is lost. I don't know what happened to it. I had it earlier today and I can't find it, but we can just go ahead and talk about it. I'll play it tomorrow, but we can talk about it. I mean, the bottom line is Jordan Faison came to Notre Dame as a walk-on on the football team and a scholarship lacrosse player. They put him out there Saturday, cut a 12-yard pass, then cut a touchdown pass. And now, because of the fact that he has played in a football game, they have flipped him over to a football scholarship. He's not on lacrosse scholarship anymore. He's now a scholarship football player, and Freeman did say he's going to continue to contribute going forward. So what do you think of this development?
Well, like I said, it's a major financial decision. It's not coming out of Marcus Freeman's money, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to clarify what people are saying in the chat. DK says it was a $0 decision. Wasn't he on scholarship for lacrosse? he was on a scholarship for lacrosse. That is accurate. They don't give out full scholarships for lacrosse. There are 12.6 scholarships for Division I lacrosse. 12.6. I just looked it up.
Okay.
So there's 50 plus kids on the lacrosse team. You're not getting full scholarships.
Right.
Okay. So he went from a partial lacrosse scholarship to a full football scholarship. That's a pretty big financial jump.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So just want to be very, very clear on that. All right. So, anyway, I think it was the right decision because they're so limited in the wide receiver room because of injury and all of those different things. They had to do it. And we've been talking about Jordan Faison for all of fall camp
Since
and
camp,
everything
yeah.
else. I mean, it's not no one that was at practice is surprised that he did what he did.
And look, there have been a lot of people who still continue to ask about Braylon James, and this is not a knock on Braylon James, but when you look at how Jordan Faison played in fall versus how Braylon James played in fall, like this is a deserved, well-earned scholarship. Jordan Faison was clearly ahead of Braylon James and some other scholarship receivers,
Correct,
for that matter, during fall camp. And the only reason that I think that it probably took this long, one, as you would have heard from Marcus Freeman, the soundbite, was some injuries in recent weeks. But two, again, the fact that he was on scholarship with another sport. And so what they had to balance is, if we're going to play this guy, we can't just designate him as a walk-on who gets to play on the football team. He has to have a football scholarship.
Yeah.
Now,
so that means they had to have one available.
Yeah, and they did have
a
couple open scholarships still, so they're able to give that to him.
Yeah. It was just because of the situation. It was a very interesting call. And now that he's on scholarship, you're going to see a lot more of him. I do think that. I think you're going to see more of him. Maybe not a lot more, but any more is a lot. So,
what's going to be interesting is he is a slot guy, and they obviously have Chris Tyree and Jaden Greathouse. And,
correct.
It's like they're doing well with slot receivers between those two. As long as Greathouse is healthy. But now you throw Faison in there, and he obviously did. Like, they need to figure out how they're going to get production out of these outside guys. That's the biggest issue they have right now.
And he's asking how many. Joe Allen asked how many years. He's a true freshman, so all of them is what he has left.
Yeah, so like he can, he's only played in one game as of right now. So depending on what he ends up playing it, he could potentially still end up redshirting, or so he has 4 full years of eligibility. He was only a freshman this year, freshman and walk on. So. Joe, thank you for the super chat. Joe, should we be concerned about Sam Hartman? I was at the Louisville game, and during every media on-field timeout, when the offensive staff and personnel huddled on the field, he stood by himself away from the team. And I've seen some other comments like this. I will say again, watching that game and especially rewatching when you can kind of see some of his, it's hard to pick up all of it on TV, but he did have 3 interceptions at Louisville last year. And, the fans were all over him, and he had 3 fumbles in that game last year as well. And it did seem like maybe that first interception got in his head a little bit. I don't know if it was that or what, but I don't know. What do you think, Vince?
I wouldn't read too much into one game, to be honest with you, as far as his body language or whatever. I mean, what about all the other things he's been doing for his teammates and all the other ways that he's been there for you can't discount all of that from one night. And there were plenty of other times on TV where we saw him and Gino Guidugli talking on the sideline while the defense was out, on the field. So maybe it's a thing, I'll tell you what, I'll keep an eye on it during the USC game. But
I'm sure at the very least he was frustrated with himself.
Yeah.
For his performance. He's probably pretty hard on himself, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Anthony wants to know how many losses before you go to the young guys to get experience for next year.
Depends on the position that you're referring to. Is it a position where they're rotating, or are you talking about benching guys? you're not going to bench guys. No, I'm sorry. Just because they're a senior, you're not going to bench a guy just because they're older. You want to bench a guy because of the way they're playing. That's a different conversation. But you're not going to bench a guy just because there's a younger guy behind him. That's what I would say to that.
Yeah. No disagreement. Yeah. I mean, we kind of touched on it earlier. I mean,
the linebackers are playing fine, by the way. He said linebacker is the position he was referring to. What are the linebackers doing besides the stupid penalty by Marist? And like JD Bertrand had another good game as far as I could tell.
And who is it that you're going to start playing at that position?
We have shown you on multiple occasions how Jalen Snead is not ready for a full-time role.
Yeah.
So who plays full-time? Like, no, you don't bench guys just because there's younger guys behind them.
Right. The bigger question is they all still have eligibility, I believe, for next year. So the question is, are they coming back? Are they leaving? Yep. What's going to happen?
Correct.
Facilitate, inform. I generally don't like the hypotheticals. If we beat Ohio State, will we be undefeated right now?
Sure.
It's hard to say.
If it makes you feel better, sure. Yep. They'd be the number 3 team in the country right now.
We talked about it on Countdown last week. What if you had beaten Ohio State, but then you turned around and lost to Duke? How would
That's right. We did talk about that.
How different would the feel be?
Yeah.
In that case.
Yeah.
It would sure stink. You'd have the same record, but it would sure stink. And I don't know. I'll go with what you said, Vince. Let's make everybody feel good. If they had beaten Ohio State, kumbaya. Yeah. They're in the top 10. They're in the driver's seat.
Oh, yeah. They're in the top 3, if that's the case.
Yeah.
Undefeated, baby.
How about this one? So, Mario Cristobal and Miami were leading 20-17 against Georgia Tech with about 30 seconds to go. Yellow Jackets were out of timeouts. All Miami had to do was take a knee. The game would have been over. Instead, called a handoff, which was fumbled. 4 plays later, Georgia Tech scores on a 44-yard touchdown pass. Tim Hasselbeck was the analyst in the game. The AC Network said it's the worst coaching mistake he has seen in his lifetime. What do you think about all this, man?
I got to tell you, I don't think he's wrong. I mean, that was one of the worst play calls of all. You want to talk about Marcus Freeman's play calls? You are more than welcome to do so. You want to talk about Jared Parker's play calls? You are more than welcome to do so. None of their calls were as bad as that one right there. None. 0. How do you allow that to happen? And you know who stripped him? Come on, Sean. I know you know the answer to this.
I don't actually.
Paul Mawala.
Really?
Yep.
I did not know that.
Yep.
The Penn High School.
Penn High School grad, Notre Dame, all the,
Idaho Vandal.
Yes. He's the one that stripped him of the ball and they recover. And then how did that kid get so wide open behind the defense?
Well, that's the thing. It's like, not only did you fumble, but then my gosh.
It was unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Let's remember, Mario Cristobal's got more experience than Marcus Freeman as a head coach.
Amazing. The lesson to be learned here is that all coaches make bad calls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, it very well might be, as he said, the worst decision. It's right up there.
It's up there, man. Yeah.
The Miracle at the Meadowlands was the first one that comes to mind from the early 80s with Herm Edwards and the Eagles against the Giants. I don't know if Michael Hahn and any other Giants fans are still here or old enough to remember that. But, I mean, it's the same type situation. Just take a knee. That's all you got to do. Yeah. Take a knee and the game is over.
Man.
I know.
Terrible.
Fill in the blank. It's blank that Phil Jurkovec is out as Pittsburgh's quarterback. He asked to move to tight end, but Pat Narduzzi said today he will not play tight end for the Pitt Panthers.
Wow. Okay. The blank is hilarious.
That's new information. Just got that last part today.
No, that's hilarious. The fill in the blank is hilarious because how many times has Phil Jurkovec been scheduled to play against Notre Dame once he left and it has fallen through every single time. And it is comical. It's comical how many times that has happened and the manner in which that it has happened. I mean, just absolutely comical.
Yep. I wonder if we'll get a big IG post here in a couple of weeks,
Oh, it's
when he
coming.
comes to
It's
town.
coming.
And they're not playing shipping up to Boston anymore over there, are they? At Notre Dame Stadium? No more cultural misappropriation or appropriation or whatever he called it last year.
It's just, I mean, hilarious. I'm sorry.
It is. And like you said, the fact that, he went to Boston College, it was all set for him to come in here and play Notre Dame last year. Didn't happen. Transfers to Pitt. Oh, guess who's coming to Notre Dame this year? Pittsburgh. Not going to happen. Now, something could happen to this other quarterback this week or next.
This is true.
It could still end up out there.
Pitt is a terrible football team, so anything can happen.
Yep.
I say that now, and then they'll beat Notre Dame. But,
Oh, my gosh. Don't even. You just put that in the universe. I can't even believe you did that.
Well, Major Payne already did. I read it.
If beats Freeman, people might riot. Whew, man.
Yeah, starting with us.
I mean, we're talking UConn, Syracuse territory at that point.
Yeah.
My goodness. All right. Well, that's going to do it for tonight. Appreciate you being here today. Glad you were able to come in and vent.
Yeah, seriously.
A little bit more.
I just want to say I've been giving some people in the chat a hard time. I get where you guys are coming from.
I do too.
I totally understand where you guys are coming. You guys are diehard fans. That game was terrible, start to finish. It was hard to watch, and it felt like the last, 7 minutes or so of that game took about 2 hours to go by. It was horrible. It was long, and then doing a 3-hour post-game show afterwards was even worse.
It really did, because I started writing my recap. I can't remember how much time was but it was like the outcome was obvious at that point. And so I start writing my recap, and it's like, man, is this game ever going to end like two series later? It's like, what is even going on with this game? Just end already.
Like normally I want Notre Dame games to last as long as possible because we only are, as Marcus Freeman says, you're only guaranteed 12, and I enjoy them. I just wanted that game to be over, and it was never freaking ending. So I understand where you guys are coming from. I love all of you guys. And let's just say over the past week, I've just put it into perspective. And so I'm not as fired up about it as I normally am.
Yeah.
So
I don't blame you. And it's like, I know there was a lot of back and forth between Notre Dame fans and Louisville fans on social media. And I'll tell you what, there were a lot of Notre Dame fans surprised to find out how much Louisville hated Notre Dame. And I realize they don't play that often in football, but like having been around the Notre Dame Louisville with some other sports that I've been associated with, there is a lot of venom on the Louisville side toward Notre Dame, especially when you go down there. They get their beer muscles flexed when you're down there. I'll tell you that much.
Especially for women's basketball and baseball. I remember the baseball days back when they were both in the Big East, right? Weren't they both in the Big East? Yeah. Yep. And I remember those were some drop down dragouts, man. So yeah, I get it. I get it. I just forgot about it, if I'm being honest.
I know. It all came out. I guess it sounded like they were just all over Sam Hartman, after the game when he was leaving the field and going through the tunnel. It's like, come on, man.
It's just a game, guys. Like, I get your passion, but like, settle down. I've never felt that way after a win where I need to like disparage.
Why are you still bitter after a win? Your team just won.
Let it go, man. You won. How about, Ryan Day, win with class? How about that? Try that on for size.
Oh, super chat at the last minute from David. He says, Vince, my man, thinking of you and the family this past week. Hang in there.
Appreciate it, man. Doing the best I can. This helps, believe it or not. Even though I look like I get upset, this actually helps.
Good therapy. That's right.
It is.
Glad you're here. And everyone, of course, has been thinking of you and your family as well. So,
yep. And happy birthday to you, boss.
All right. Thank you, my man. I do appreciate it. Another year older. I'll try to get a little sexier next year. We'll see what happens.
It's already done.
All right. Well, have a good night. Hit the like button on your way out and subscribe, rate, and review. And we will talk to you tomorrow. There will be whiteboard on IB Nation Sports Talk.
Baby.